welcome. This is the Redwood Regional Audubon meeting. Anybody is thinking they were coming to the Native Plant Society or something else. Maybe Masonic inductions there. The Audubon Society, as most of you know, those of you who aren't members, be sure and sign up on the sign-up sheet in the back, and even if you are members, sign up on it. And Audubon Society has lots of field trips and something like 200 a year. So I'd like to, I will introduce Jared. Jared did his youthful growing up in Sacramento, as I recall, and then did undergraduate at Humboldt, and then went on to do his master's degree at Humboldt. Do we see a pattern here? And he did work as master's down in Costa Rica. Did some magnificent, insightful research down there. And then went off to Louisiana, chasing. Why'd you go to Louisiana? I thought it was your girlfriend there. But, no, she went there because you were that's your story. He did wonderful research in Brazil down there, and he's published lots and lots of papers. And we're really happy to have him in Humboldt County working with us now. Jared Wolfe.
Introduce you all to the Equatorial Guinea Bird Initiative. This is really a group of 3 ornithologists and a professional videographer who decided to go pursue bird conservation and try to describe some undescribed bird communities in arguably the country least known to science. So I'm going to introduce you a little bit to the country and then talk about the project. There's one caveat to this talk. About half of it is video. Like I said, we went down there with a videographer. So he edited and put together some beautiful video. You'll be able to tell what he did, and then the ones that I took and kind of coarsely spliced up and stuck in there. It'll be obvious those are the ones that I edited. So just to introduce you guys to Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea is in the Gulf of Guinea in Central Africa on the western coast. And there's 3 geographic regions. There's the island of Annobon, which is largely unoccupied. It's a small island with lots of endemics. There's the mainland, which people refer to as Rio Muni, which is largely unoccupied except for one city, big city of any size, Bata. It's full of Congolese forest. And most of the development, as well as the capital city, exists in on the island of Bioko, and the capital is Malabo. So the majority of the people reside here. The power infrastructure, both politically, economically, is all centered in Bioko. I started working with birds in Africa about 1.5 years ago in Kenya, and reading some of the literature from African Bird Club, it's pretty obvious that Equatorial Guinea is very poorly known. It's unequivocally one of the most poorly surveyed countries as far as people understanding what's going on ornithologically in the world. And to give you an idea of the eBird list from there, there's 4 people out of the whole country's history that have submitted eBird lists. And the top 3 are part of Equatorial Guinea Bird Initiative. So there's one gentleman from the island who's submitted lists in the history of eBird in Equatorial Guinea. This pattern holds true historically too. It's very hard to find museum specimens that were collected there. It's very hard to find notes from ornithological expeditions that went to the country. So it begs the question, why is this? People have gone to the neighboring countries, Gabon and Cameroon. Why haven't people been to Equatorial Guinea? You really have to understand the history to understand why, historically as well as contemporarily, there's not a lot of research being done. So just to give you a little background, it was a colonial power, it was a colony of Spain. Spain was a colonial power. And Equatorial Guinea got their independence in 1968. And the first president who christened himself president for life shortly thereafter, by all accounts started going insane. He started ethnically cleansing minorities, attacked groups of his own tribe, and there's accounts as far as when the colonial power grid began to fail. Instead of calling in engineers, he called in Fong witch doctors to bring it back online. So this type of governance just spiraled the country into deeper and deeper poverty. They had some of the highest rates of mortality due to malaria. And because of the human rights violations, the United States cut off all diplomatic ties with Equatorial Guinea. So his nephew, gentleman Teodoro Obiang, who was governor of the island of Bioko, realized things have to change, and they had a military coup in 1979. Obiang's been president ever since then, and here's a picture of Teodoro Obiang and his wife. And you guys remember I said that all diplomatic ties were cut with Equatorial Guinea, but here they are. Obviously, we've reestablished diplomatic ties. Can anybody guess why? Oil, yeah. So in the late 1990s, there was a major discovery of a large reserve of oil in the political boundaries of Equatorial Guinea in the Gulf of Guinea. And this did amazing things for the economy. So this is GDP per capita of Equatorial Guinea, the dotted line. This is Spain, its colonial power. And you can see when they discovered oil, so this was one of the poorest countries in the world, one of the lowest GDP per capita in Africa. Within several years, it became the richest country in Africa in several years per capita GDP. It actually surpassed its colonial power, Spain. So incredible amounts of money have been, within a very brief period of time, have been flooding the government. And there's, pros and cons to this type of money. One of the major cons, one of the major threats is if you're a small country and you don't have a lot of infrastructure and you're weak militarily, you're a target. So one of the most famous incidents of a coup of people trying to take Equatorial Guinea's wealth is this gentleman, Mark Thatcher, shown with his grandmother, Margaret, funded South African mercenaries led by Simon Mann, it's a famous South African mercenary, to fly his army to make landfall in Bioko, take over the government, and install a puppet government, and then take the resources for themselves. This only stopped, by all accounts, this would have been a successful coup, but they had to refuel in Zimbabwe on their way to Equatorial Guinea, and the secret police of Robert Mugabe stopped them and actually sent Simon Mann and his mercenary army back to Equatorial Guinea, where they were tried and sentenced to prisons, and a lot of them are still there in prison in Equatorial Guinea. More recently, our Nigerian pirates have sacked several years ago the capital, Bioko. They just ride up, they stormed the city, and they made it as far as the presidential palace before they were killed. So they made it far. They made it pretty far. So this is obviously a real threat to the government of Equatorial Guinea, and this has led to all types of hardships for people who want to do research there. Visa restrictions, two-way radios to stay in contact in the force are illegal in the country. Every few miles there's military checkpoints. If you don't have official authorization, you could be bribed. It's a very difficult country to work in. And most interestingly is the government, because of these threats, have decided to start developing the previously undeveloped mainland. So they're developing away from these vulnerable coastlines. And one of the most audacious developmental projects I've ever heard of. So in virgin Congolese rainforest, the government is using their billions of dollars to cut out a new city right out of the woods and build a new capital city that they call Oyala. And this is a picture of the university. It's going to be the largest university in Central Africa, in Oyala. And this UFO-shaped thing here is the library. And just to give you a feel for kind of what's going on there, I'll just read this last paragraph of this story from the BBC. It says, earth movers, cranes, and international construction crews from as far afield as Brazil, Poland, and North Korea are turning the dreams of President Teodoro Obiang, Equatorial Guinea's self-styled guarantor of peace and propeller of development, into logic-defying reality. So amazing development, unprecedented development going on in the mainland. So really, given the undescribed bird communities, bird species, and undescribed subspecies and populations communities are at real risk of being completely lost before they're even discovered. So because of this, we decided to form the Equatorial Guinea Bird Initiative to go to Equatorial Guinea and try to, our objectives were threefold. One, work with local government officials as well as NGOs and try to foster conservation. Two, describe the bird communities that are previously undescribed. And then three, start training locals to make them stewards of their own bird communities. So this is the team. This is Mo Twine, he's the videographer who made some of the fine videos you're about to see. Luke Powell, he's at the Smithsonian. Myself, and this is Jacob Cooper, who's at Kansas State University. These are actually the American ambassador to Equatorial Guinea and his lovely wife. And the great thing about working in a country where there's not a lot of Americans, you go and you get invited to the ambassador's house for dinner. It's pretty cool. So that's the team. More importantly than the team is through this whole process, we're partnering with the Equatorial Guinean government. This is key. We've been in communication with them the entire time. They've actually been very welcoming. They're very interested in learning more about their bird communities and having their staff biologists learn the modern contemporary bird monitoring techniques that I learned from CJ and we're actually passing on to them so they can actually monitor a lot of their bird communities. As well as the only people who are doing research there at Drexel University, and they are on the island of Bioko. They don't go to the mainland. They focus on primates. They have a feeling for how things work logistically, so we partner with them on Bioko. This is the government biologist who came with this. His name is Obama. You'll see more of him in a minute. So our objectives: first, to make landfall in Bioko, explore Bioko, try to document some of the rarities and the endemics that exist. And remember, Bioko is the island. And then go to the unexplored mainland, Rio Muni, and really assess the feasibility and try to get a handle on the threats to birds, census the bird communities, and as I said, work with the locals to see if we can even start to initiate conservation action. For the rest of this talk, because it's a lot of bird watchers in the crowd, we're going to focus on this second one and talk a little bit about the birds. This is a map of the places we went. So we had multiple locations throughout Bioko, and then multiple locations along the coast, as well as this area here on the border of Gabon is called Altos de Ensor, where we spent a lot of our time, because this is one of the least explored areas of the country, and so we put a lot of effort there. So the video I'm about to show is a well-edited video made by Mo, and it'll give you a feeling. It's got music and all that. It'll give you a feeling for the trip, how it went, and kind of set the mood for the rest of the
So the more that we know about a bird in the hand, the more tools we have to determine if the birds are doing well, which tells us, in general, if the forest is doing well. Oh, yeah. Oh, nice.
When we cut trails in the forest and we put nets that are 3 meters tall, where those nets are capturing all the birds that are moving around in this thick Congolese understory.
Work my way up the back of the bird. The net slips off its wings, and it's out. So we're getting back to the station, process them, and let them go. Do that thing. It takes much less effort to go out and birdwatch, but when we get the bird in the hand, guys like Jared can get way more resolution on how the bird is doing by looking at the fault bars, by looking at molt limits, by looking at fat, other things that you just can't see on a bird in the tree. And there are a few people in the world that actually do this technique, so we're trying to teach it to the locals and have them sort of be their own stewards.
Okay, so we're walking along the beach and came across this leatherback sea turtle, and leatherbacks are the largest sea turtle in the world.
So that's where we went. That's where we set the nets. We're on the upside back net.
Check out the size of that beast right now. Guy's been macheteing since the day he was born.
barely caught. Beautiful bird.
The local is telling us that it's going to rain a lot here very, very soon.
Todo mundo sabe karate.
I go to the iodine, so we'll hope that I get to skip the dysentery part of this ride.
They'll sit, and then if you pass a hand in front of their body, they do what people call booting. And they'll shoot out their talons and grab hold of your hand, and it could be like 2 inches of talon buried in the palm of your hand. Really painful. So you have to be careful with capturing raptors.
Have you been booted?
Several times.
We're going to have a crowdsourcing effort I'll talk about a little bit later. So the trip started, as I said, in Bioko, and we made landfall in Malabo, and we went to Drexel's research station in Mocha and started banding birds there. And we got some amazing birds. These subspecies of black-headed paradise flycatcher, it's endemic to the island. These iridescent blue, and I spend a lot of time in the New World tropics where they have obligate antbirds with bare patches of skin around their eye, but nothing like this.
And you can see he has an iridescent blue bill, and the inside of the bill is this bright lemon yellow. It's like a really unique plumage pattern, plus he has these long central tail feathers. So this guy is commonly found with mixed species flocks here, and he'll even travel with small family groups as well. And a pretty common, beautiful bird found in West Africa. So we're really lucky to capture this guy.
And one thing that I study is I study molt patterns. And just real briefly, I know molt sounds really boring, but it's really important for birds because, John Q. Bird could migrate, breed, and molt. And everybody's concerned about breeding and migration. Everybody kind of skips molt, but it's incredibly informative to learn about birds' life cycles and things like that. So it's really neat capturing these birds because nobody knows anything about their molt. And finding these really cool molt patterns. This is a partial preformative molt. You don't have to understand what that means other than it's really cool. And the birds in North America show very similar patterns, which was interesting to find out. Another beautiful bird that was quite common was this sexually dimorphic northern double-collared sunbird, and the females are more drab plumaged. And I was trying to read a lot about the natural history of these birds, not just check them off on a list, but learn a little bit about them. And these guys are monogamous, and they fill the same niche as hummingbirds in North America. They're nectivorous largely, and they'll also gnat and eat small insects and whatnot. But these guys are monogamous and they hold territories. And when we were bird watching, we'd see adults regularly congregate in a bush and be singing and not really fighting, but interacting. And this is such strange behavior for a monogamous bird. When we came back from the field, a paper was published talking about this same thing. And interestingly, it's this group display. They think that the territorial borders of these birds will actually, the territory holders will come together and do a group defense display. And that'll keep potentially floaters or other birds away. So that might be a unique behavior to this group of birds. Another really great bird that we captured are yellow-rumped tinkerbird. Anybody knows where they get their name?
From the call.
Exactly. They get it from that tink-like call. And this is a ubiquitous call throughout much of western, eastern, and central Africa. And tinkerbirds form a complex that can be kind of hard to differentiate the species, as many similar species live in syncapture. They're living together. So here's Jacob from the field talking a little bit about how to tell this guy apart.
So this is the yellow-rumped tinkerbird.
So you can see the nice clean white stripe on the side of the face. And if this were the yellow-throat tinkerbird, it would have kind of a duskier throat, and that white line would be connected to the rest of the body, but it's very clearly separate on this bird, and it's very whitish. But as you can see, it's got a nice bright yellow rump.
Thanks, Jacob. And probably one of my favorites, these groups of birds in Africa, wattle-eyes, they get their name for obvious reasons. This is black-necked wattle-eye. And once again, very interesting type of physiology where, once again, there's birds with bare eyes. And when we first captured this, I said, is that skin attached somehow? Is it a true wattle, like Carol said, kind of like a rooster has, the loose skin on a rooster's head? Sure enough, it is. You can pull it, manipulate it, and it's really bizarre. And so I looked all through the literature trying to find people who've done maybe manipulative experiments with this, try to figure out what it's for, and there's nothing really out there. So it's a potentially interesting line of research that can be pursued, but really cool, beautiful birds. They're also sexually dichromatic too, where the males have larger wattles than the females.
Can they move it?
No, you can with your finger. Yeah. And once again, interesting molt limits that I won't belabor, other than they're really cool molt patterns going on in a lot of these birds. So one of the cool things about working in Mocha on the island, which is a little bit more developed, is we get to interact with community members. There's also Drexel graduate students there. And you know, our philosophy is when we're working in these communities, get the kids involved. But in Equatorial Guinea, the adults are very friendly. Everybody wants to learn about the birds. We figure we get the kids, you know, really jazzed about the birds. They'll get their parents jazzed about the birds. So, you know, teach them the species, teach them a little bit about the ecology, teach them some basic holds. That's a Cameroon sunbird that he's letting go. So, from Mocha, Dr. Luke Powell, one of our collaborators, is about to tell you all about the next trek we're about to take. But just to give you a frame of reference, there's these two large volcanoes here, and this is a large preserve in this very isolated town called Eureka. So we're going to backpack through here down to the coast, and from our research in Equatorial Guinea, it looks like this portion of the island nobody's ever censused birds before. So we're going to try to access this and do the 20-kilometer hike back up a mountain up to Mocha, banding birds along the way. And here's Luke talking a little bit about that.
The only spot really that has water between here and there. Okay. And then it's basically straight on till midnight until you get to Eureka.
Alright, so man, we're taking this big trek today. Big exploration, 2-day trip, 2 nights, 3 days. So we've come in many kilometers on the road from Mocha, passed into the saddle between 2 craters, and we're working our way south down to the coast. So this is like a brand new highway that the Chinese are building. Look at this 50-pound pack on my back, full of like a scope and a tripod and a shitload of food and all this other equipment that we need. It is heavy as hell, and we still got a long ride to go. And we drove as far as we could go onto this new paved road, which is essentially a highway, to this last connected town, Eureka, which is the last town in Equatorial Guinea that's not connected to anything until this road is complete anyway. So it's this opportunity to access these previously inaccessible areas. And for us, this is super, super cool because it lets us get at areas where, as far as we know, no ornithologists have ever been. So we're going to set up camp there and then climb basically up a different trail in the super inaccessible or previously inaccessible place, totally untouched, and do our bird survey work over those next 2 days. We're going to band, we're going to do survey work, and we're going to see if we can find things on this island that have never been found before.
And the birds were awesome. Going up the hill, full of forest robins. These, kingfishers are really diverse in Africa. So this is white-bellied kingfisher. And just once again, the plumage and coloration is just insane. We have birds like summer tanagers and cardinals, which deposit carotenoids in their bills and their feathers that give these red colors. Nothing like this, and it almost glows in the hand. It's truly amazing birds. And the avifauna of Africa is very different. A lot of these birds presumably evolved in the savanna-like habitats in Central and Eastern Africa. So you get a lot of carnivorous birds, even in areas in the forest where you have a little clear patch, and these birds will come in. And as you can tell by this bird's bill, he's a seed eater, and this is red-faced, rufous wing, and brilliant bird. Pretty common in the forest, and it was a treat to capture. So how did we do? So here's just the findings from Bioko. As you can see, striated heron hasn't been seen for 70 years. First record reef heron, mottled spinetail, which was considered a vagrant, but we found a breeding colony. It was actually the breeding at a police station, and it's illegal to take photos, and so we couldn't take photos. Common green shank. This is an endemic Fernando Poe batis. A lot of cool records. Probably one of the neatest ones is this Fernando Poe swift, which the species is only known from 10 sightings. And we got a photograph, and it looks pretty good to be confirmed as the 11th known sighting of this particular swift. And that's from a couple days' work on the island. So it really shows just how little ornithological work has been done in Equatorial Guinea. So from the island, we flew to Bata, and we made our way to this corner here, Altos de Ensort, to meet up with the government biologist Ubama, who is going to join us on the trip out to the forest. And we were really interested in this location because it's pretty inaccessible, and there hasn't been a lot of work done there, so it was really interesting going there and just seeing what will fall in the net. So here's a little video showing that I put together some of the birds that we captured and some of the logistics along the way.
No tenemos interés de Vinayo a Conibe. Aquí está Conibe. De Conibe venimos y...
Yeah, man.
Come on. Here it is. It's tail sticking out.
Giant land snails. They're delicious. You can pick them up on the side of the road, barbecued.
Yeah. Buenos días. Buenos días. ¿Qué tal, Jared?
Es la naturaleza. No sé dónde de ahí.
De ahí.
Ya ven, sí. Acaba de pasar.
Pescado que anda. Todo el mundo sabe karate. Muy bien. Adiós. Porque a veces...
It's like nothing in the book, man. It's the very first bird we caught.
Really?
So weird when the body is, but the head doesn't.
What is that?
Flea of some sort. Can you turn it?
So, turn to fire cresting.
That is fire crested.
Okay, rotate it again for me.
Google direction.
I got it.
Easy work. Barely caught, and these guys will.
So the first thing to do when you get a raptor in the net, so you have to isolate the feet, because the business end is the feet. Those talons will really do a number on you. The head is less strong.
Beautiful bird. Really messy dog.
So that's close as I can get. Just spin around.
You want them to do these forest birds pretty bad.
Yeah, but we need those audio-visual surveys.
Obama, por favor, el libro.
All right. And besides the birds on the video, there is also a real diversity of sunbirds, which was great. Collared sunbird, Cameroon sunbird, different subspecies than on Bioko, as well as western olive sunbird. And this bird actually threw us for a loop as far as identifying it, because this is the juvenile plumage, and we couldn't find in the literature anything about a red lower mandible. And we don't know if that's unique to that population in Equatorial Guinea or what, but yeah, it was a lot of fun trying to figure those out. From there, we wanted to go to these 3 rivers that make the border between Gabon and Equatorial Guinea. Here at Gabon, the mudflats are really extensive, and shorebirds are not very well documented for Equatorial Guinea. So our thought was we'd shoot down there, we're going to hire a boat at Kogo, go through the estuaries, and try to document some of these shorebird species that would be on the mudflats that previously haven't been seen in the country. So this is just a brief video showing our trek there. So this is the meeting of the 3 rivers going to Kogo, and right off the bat we got hammercock, which is a cool bird. It was a good record for the south of Rio Muni. And this place was really beautiful. Soaring over, there's all types of palm nut vultures as well as pink-backed pelicans, a lot of shorebirds on the mudflat. And as we're going through here, we're picking off records. As we're going deeper, we're getting marsh sandpiper, wood sandpiper, common green shank, all these new species for Equatorial Guinea, and getting really excited. You can see just expanses of mudflats. Pink-backed pelican flying by, as well as in these mangroves, picking off some of the shorebirds in the mangroves. So, as we're continuing being really excited about all the country records we're getting, I tell Luke, oh, we better GPS the point, because this is probably going to go into a publication and all these various records, and turns on his GPS and says, oh no. I said, what's wrong? He says, we're in Gabon. I said, we're not in Gabon, we're in Equatorial Guinea. And we turned to the boat driver and said, where are we? We're in Gabon. Come on. Gabon has plenty of birders. This list is supposed to be in the political boundary of Equatorial Guinea. He said, you guys wanted mudflats. And we said, yeah. He said, they're better in Gabon. So we drove. So we missed all those species. We have a great eBird list for Gabon. So what happened was, unbeknownst to us, we cruised in here into Gabon. But we did get hammercock, and hammercock is a really unique bird. There's 2 species in its own family. They're actually more closely related to pelicans than they are shorebirds, and they get their name from that hammer-shaped head. And they have really unique behaviors where they commonly congregate on mudflats, and they do what people in the literature call ceremonies, where they'll dance around and sing around each other. They don't know the the intricacies of what those communications and these ceremonies mean, as well as they build huge nests. This isn't a big bird, but they'll build 4-foot wide structures that a man can stand on. And very bizarre behavior, interesting bird. So what did we get on the mainland? First record, lesser kestrel, wood sandpiper, red-chested swallow, second record. But then that unknown Cameroptera. It's the very first bird we caught in Altos de Ensort. And we've been in contact with, African Bird Club, Nick Barrow. He literally wrote the book to Central West African Birds. The second edition, West African Birds, is coming out. Sending them photos, measurements, going through museum specimens at Smithsonian, and just nothing looks like this. It's closely resembling a gray-backed Cameroptera, and Luke, I think in New York at the Museum of Natural History, found a specimen that looks very similar to this that was captured near the border of Cameroon. It was in Cameroon, bordering Equatorial Guinea. So a good reason to go back and get genetic samples and figure out what exactly is going on with this guy. Gray-backed Cameroptera don't have the neck band, their eyes are more yellow and their tail is longer. And that unknown raptor. Once again, we sent it out to the experts in African bird identification, and getting down to the minute detail of the length of the toes and trying to figure out, could it be a weird subspecies of something? It's most similar to African goshawk or chestnut-flanked sparrowhawk. And once again, there's different identification criteria that rule out both of those. And so, another mystery bird, and another good reason to get back to these forests and collect genetic samples and see what's going on. So the future. Some good news, we took our results and we gave them to National Geographic, and they're going to be supporting a big chunk of our next trip, which is coming in a month, going back in December. And this is going to be much more extensive, and our surveys are going to be focused on sensitive species that are commonly sold in the bushmeat trade, and we're finalizing the protocols to get at that too. We're also working with the National University in Bioko, with a professor there, an Equatorial Guinean professor, to bring some students along with us during the whole trip. And also the development of the Central African University, Luke has been helping them actually as kind of a de facto consultant, suggesting that they create a conservation, biology, or an ecology department. They weren't considering that, and now they are. They're taking it pretty seriously, and they're in contact with Luke and Smithsonian to develop those departments at the university that they're building in Wayala. And then we're also going to be releasing next week a crowdsourcing effort just to make up the amount of money that National Geographic's not covering. So if you guys think it's cool work and we'll bring back even better results next time, check out the crowdsourcing effort and feel free to donate at whatever you feel like donating to help us continue this work.
What is crowdsourcing effort?
It's going to be on Kickstarter. And if you go to Equatorial, our Facebook site, and friend us, you'll get all the information. And we have constant updates about what's going on in Equatorial Guinea, talking about the birds, and we'll link the crowdsourcing effort to our Facebook site. Yeah. So that's it, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a history question.
Sure.
How that country ended up that strange shape.
That's a really good question.
There's a little box on the mainland and the island over there.
It's changed hands a few times, and I'm sure that has something. I've tried to really get into the meaning of even the word Guinea, the root word of that, and why and it gets way back to Portugal, and they were the first people there before Spain took it over. And Portugal, Bioko is not up until Messias took power in 1968. It wasn't Bioko, it was called Fernando Po, named after the explorer, the Portuguese explorer who was exploring Western Africa. And so it was under the Portuguese flag for a long time, and under some political wrangling between Spain and France and Cameroon, and also Britain and Sierra Leone, those were all carved out, those countries. And I don't know what political wrangling went on to make them the way they are. But yeah, it's the only, Spanish is lingua franca there, it's the only Spanish-speaking country in Africa, and it was previously Portuguese. I don't really know how that was carved out. Sorry. Yeah.
Is the highest per capita income somewhat distributed in a, like with the universities being built? Is that
No.
trying to get to all people? Or not?
No, not at all. It's pretty, I mean, to the president's benefit, you know, he's almost a benevolent dictator, where there's a lot of peace, the different tribes are getting along. He's putting a lot of investment into the university, into the infrastructure, building roads and whatnot that probably need to be built. But the money doesn't percolate down to people outside of the inner circle of the family. And it's interesting because you can drive down these amazing highways that are being built in the mainland, and there's nobody on them. 0 people, and there's people, you know, coming out of the woods like with their pangolin that they just shot. And that's it. It's really like 2 worlds colliding. So it's not percolating down at all.
Do you have no other Peace Corps volunteers there?
I don't think there's any Peace Corps volunteers. There's the, as far as the only NGOs, there's petroleum funded, I think it's Hess Energy potentially, that they actually did some really good work where malaria, most of Equatorial Guinea, I think in Bata in particular, they had some of the highest rates of mortality associated, particularly on babies with malaria. And so the oil companies, when they sign these contracts, a typical contract, a certain portion of that has to go to like humanitarian or developmental issues. And so they funded a malaria eradication program on the coast. And there's still lots of malaria, but they saved a lot of people. So as far as NGO work, those are the only people. Besides Drexel, they have some primate conservation stuff going on. Those are the only people I've heard of in the country.
Is Ebola going to be a factor?
We are holding off buying our tickets to see what happened because it was slowly moving its way down south. It went into Nigeria, and it looks like Nigeria did a really good job and got a handle on it and squashed it before it started spreading. So as long as Nigeria can hold out, it doesn't get into Cameroon, yeah, we're scheduled to go. So it's not a factor at this point. Yeah.
A number of the photographs made the birds look as though they had unusually short, broad wings.
Yeah.
That's actually the case.
Yeah, as a
flying very down to cover.
Yeah, as a general rule, non-migratory birds, and all these birds shown here were non-migratory. They have typically shorter, stubbier wings because they don't really need those long wings to facilitate long flights to their, you know, for their seasonal migratory.
And they can work in the confined spaces of the very dense.
Yeah, yeah, that too. Yeah, it's typical. I mean, even here, if you look at like a rented, they don't have long wings like a Swainson's thrush. They'll have short, stubby wings because they don't need them. They just have like their little 1 hectare home range that they're flying around in. So same thing with these guys.
Is there much habitat diversity in the country? It looked like you were mostly in either rainforest or maybe swamp forest.
Yeah, there is. I guess it's all relative to the tropics, but for the tropics there's a nice elevational gradient on the islands because there's big volcanoes, and so you get up towards, you know, a couple thousand meters, and the trees really start getting gnarled like cloud forest. And there's some endemic birds that occur up there that are really cool. And then of course the mangroves. And on where we originally wanted to go, while we went to Altos de Ensor, because they have these really neat rock formations that go high, and then they have forests on top. And we lofty thoughts we're going to try to go up the rocks and see like what birds are on top of these plateaus, these kind of mesas. And so there's a lot of heterogeneity. And actually those rocks, there's a species of bird called Picathartes, which is only found in Africa. And it's a really unique, beautiful bird that walks around on the ground, and it's closely tied to rocky outcrops and rainforests because it nests underneath those rocks. And it's potentially a sensitive bird, a bird that might be hunted. And so that's actually one of our target species next year. We found a nested one that was inactive, but we want to go back and find them. So yeah, different scales. There's heterogeneity. There's not like snow-capped peaks, but there's cloud forests and mangrove forests and stuff like that. Yeah.
How do you avoid malaria?
Just take prescribed medication, hope for the best.
No, I mean, there is something that you take that.
Yeah, definitely in West Africa.
Do any birders anywhere use feather clippings for their genetic research?
Yeah, they, not clippings, but pull the feather.
Pull the feather
and it's kind of tricky because a lot of the...
so when you had that unique specimen or two, you pulled a couple feathers?
Well, we didn't have permits to. We want to be in the good graces of the government. So we've been in contact with them and getting the necessary permits to get genetic resources out of country. But of course, this is totally new to them. The great thing about a dictatorship, the president likes you, it happens. The president's like, you know, I want a road, and the road is built. And so there's not a lot of bureaucracy if you have the right people in your corner. And so far, it looks like we've had the right people in our corner. We actually had a letter. It's so cool. This official letter that they sent to us. It's signed by like high-end, members of the government. And the letter is just, do whatever you want. And so every 10 miles come to a military checkpoint, and they'd be like spinning AKs, and they were like, oh, what, I'm probably overanalyzing, but I could see they'd be like, how much to get past, because that's pretty common on Bioko, at least with the expats that are there. And you just show them the letter, and they're like, all right. Yeah.
Fossil fuels mostly offshore?
They're all offshore. And there's actually, according to the energy companies, they're going to be exhausted by 2020. And the government passed a plan called 2020, which they're trying to diversify their economy before 2020. And so it's kind of unfortunate, actually. The World Bank was in there when I was there, and there's not many expats there. So we ended up, the nights we were in Malabo, we'd go hang out with the World Bank people and also people from the embassy. And the World Bank were on their way out. They had some certain demands for transparency in the finances of the government to help them diversify their economy and whatnot, or make recommendations. And they said, it's not happening, and they're out of there. And so we'll see. They want to do ecotourism, is potentially maybe one reason they're very friendly to us. But it'd be hard to have ecotourism if you need permits for binoculars. There's military checkpoints every 10 miles that they want to bribe you at. So I don't know. We'll see what'll happen.
So why all those roads on the mainland if all the fuel is offshore?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Why are the Chinese building roads here?
They're contracted with the Equatorial Guinea government. So, and it's amazing. I mean, some of the areas we went to would have taken weeks and weeks and weeks and only accessible during the dry season. It would take a 4x4, gallons and gallons of fuel to go. And now it's a couple hours. And it's just this 4-lane superhighway, and there's no one on. And they just cross the country.
But it looked like you were often encountering big semis.
Yeah, they're actively building the highways.
Oh, they're just building them.
Yeah. And that's once again, gets down to the power of a dictatorship. I mean, he's like, I want superhighways. And they're built within a very
But that's got to be really harmful to the forest.
Oh, it's awful. We would walk in to, we get more into it in the crowdsourcing video, but we would go into some transects on the mainland and start hiking. The forest was here one day, and we hike in one day, do our surveys, and come back, and we're like, when we hit 100 meters earlier, the forest is gone. So the Chinese contractors are in there and just wiping out the forest in an amazingly fast pace. So, yeah, it's a real problem. And we're hoping, ideally, some of our protocols are meant to get at, how is this affecting the bird communities, and potentially proposing ways to the government to get them to start caring about mitigating some of the disaster that's going on. But at the same time, it will help the country. I mean, it does need to develop at a certain level. And these communities are largely totally cut off. And these roads are going to offer them all new opportunities. But if it's like the New World tropics, I work in the Amazon for years, and there's the fish boning technique. If you build a road, the fish bone secondary roads, and then there's more fish bones, and it looks like bird feathers on maps. And that'll inevitably happen here. And the people they hunt a lot, and so there'll be a whole new set of pressures on the wildlife in those areas. Yeah.
Question over here.
Oh, Alexa. No? Cool. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Sarah on now.
Nice ride with it. Everybody else is 6 to 8 seconds different. Mine is 10. That's funny. Hi, Kendall. I decided to come over and check on you. I'll go get it. Just a minute.